The following instructional video is a summary of your impending duties as an exoplanetary pioneer for Freaknz Incorporated.
Welcome to Satisfactory. Alright, so this is how it goes. You're being dropped onto a planet with the sole purpose of completing projects for Freaknz Inc. Once you've completed these projects, you get all kinds of upgrades, everything from bounce pads to weapons to even nuclear energy. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with the basics. Now, first things first, we deconstruct the drop pod. Freaknz Inc. has stored inside this drop pod everything we'll need to build a basic hub. Ada, your new best friend, tells you that in order to kick things off, we first need to find some basic ores on the planet. Firstly, we will start with iron, as it's the building block of nearly everything we make. Pulling out our resource scanner, we quickly see we're surrounded by a number of nodes. She also informs us that it's best to start somewhere open and flat. So I picked these 3 nodes right here. After gathering a small amount of iron, Ada now informs us that we can build the hub.
Fourth objective, build the hub.
Now, the hub is the center of our whole factory. Not only do we need the workbench to produce all of our basic materials, but we also need the terminal to help us unlock upgrades to make our factory bigger, faster, and better.
Fifth objective, complete hub upgrade 1. Note, the craft bench and hub terminal are essential for progression to the next objective.
With all of the basic workstations in place now, we began crafting all the supplies we needed to upgrade our hub. Now, the hub upgrades began very basic, simply iron plates and iron rods, but as we progressed down through the tiers and got to hub upgrade number 3, we required copper wire, something that we did not currently have. Like we did with the iron, I pulled out my trusty resource scanner and began to have a look around for some copper nodes. Luckily for us, there was one just up the hill that was really easily accessible. Now, to make mining go a little bit faster, I'd crafted myself an equipment workshop and built a few automatic miners. Now, these little guys will drop down on any node and begin gathering resources for you until their inventory is full. These were super helpful in getting myself started. I also chucked a couple of extra automatic miners down on the iron nodes at base. After refining the copper ore into ingots and turning it into wire, I was ready for hub upgrade number 3. Now, with these upgrades, I had acquired 2 new buildings, the smelter and the constructor. Realizing that my hub was right in the way of where I wanted to build these, I picked it up and moved it out of the way. Now with the hub out of the way, I could start putting in the smelters. The idea was the ore would come from the ore deposits into the smelters, and then from there I could use it to craft to the workshop to create all the upgrades I needed. Now, one essential thing to getting the factory running is power. Now, luckily for us, the hub comes equipped with a biomass burner attached to the back end. All we need to do for this is run around, gather a bunch of leaves and wood, throw it into the burner, and boom, we have power. Now, to expand our power network so that all our machines could run, we needed to get some concrete. So we went and gathered some limestone and took it back to the workbench to start making our little power network. Now, instead of having to craft everything by hand, it's much better to use constructors, so I put a couple of these down in front of the smelters and got them crafting plates and poles for me. Now, we'd begun to run short on copper ore, but luckily for us, our little automatic miners had been hard at work gathering copper ore for us, so we went up to the top, picked a few up, and brought them back to base. Now, with all the necessary materials gathered, we completed hub upgrade number 4. This gave us access to undoubtedly one of the most useful items in this game, Conveyor Belts. Now, these are essential to automation and Satisfactory. They allow you to take materials from one production plant into another. In our case here, we're taking the ingots from the smelter straight into the constructor, so we don't need to pick up and carry anything. Now, with our machines running by themselves, it wasn't long until hub upgrade number 5 was unlocked. Now, with hub upgrade 5 came the automatic miners. This allows us to send a conveyor belt from an automatic miner into a smelter, into a constructor, to fully automate the production of plates and poles. Now, with all this new machinery, we were consuming a lot more power. So, to make up for this, I decided to purchase an upgrade that gave me a chainsaw. This let me feed our biofuel reactors using wood instead of leaves, which was going to last a lot longer. After undoing nearly all the work in Team Trees, I headed back to base, crafted up some solid biofuel and slammed it into my new reactors. I also along the way made some upgrades to our little copper production plant. It was now time to go about gathering all the parts we needed to get the next tiers of upgrades. We would need a lot of the items that these plans gave us to build things for the space elevator later. A few milestones later, I'd unlocked the assembler, an essential part in building some of the more complicated items that you were unable to build by hand. So, to put these in place and keep them nicely ordered, I decided to put down a factory floor. With my shiny new floor in place, I began to place assemblers to build reinforced plates, rotors, and smart plating. These would be put into the space elevator later to help me get upgraded to the next tier. Now, to produce the space elevator, it requires a lot of resources, mainly 500 concrete, 250 iron plate, 400 iron rod, and 1500 copper wire. Luckily for me, I was already producing most of these goods throughout my factory. Concrete was the only one that I was majorly lacking. But only a short time later, I was ready to build the space elevator and start making sacrifices to Fix-It Inc. in exchange for juicy plans. Now, producing all these parts myself at the workbench was going to take way too long, so instead I decided to make sure that every single component was automated. Now, this was easier said than done. Not only would we need to make the factory, but we'd also need to upgrade our power production plant so it could handle all of these new machines running off it. Luckily for me, I'd already been producing smart plating, and I had perfectly 50 sitting inside my last assembler, ready to go straight into the space elevator. And with that, the first sacrifice was made to allow me to unlock the next tier of upgrades. After unlocking this, we set about gathering all the parts needed to put a coal production facility together. The two components you need for coal power generation are obviously coal and then also water. So just over the hill, about 500 meters from the main base, I found a large lake with 3 coal nodes surrounding it. This would be a perfect spot to put my first generation base. Wasting no time, I grabbed all the materials necessary and began running a power line all the way over to the new base location. After slapping down a quick foundation, I placed all of the generators and began to weave the conveyor belts and pipes into place to make sure they were evenly fed. For now, we had way too much coal for all of our reactors, but this was fine. In the future, it gives us the possibility to split it into even more reactors if we're suddenly under capacity for power again. After a quick bit of rearranging, all the coal generators were fed and they had plenty of excess power for us to use when building new factories. With coal generation out of the way, it was time to move on to steel parts. We gathered some parts off the production line to research basic steel production. This required both coal and iron ore. Getting the iron ore was the easy part. Just a couple of 100 meters towards our power production base, there was a group of around about 5 nodes sitting right in between us. I decided to set up my base here. I would conveyor belt over excess coal from our power production plant and send it into the foundries here to help us produce steel. However, I drastically underestimated just how much power this new steel production facility was going to use. Once finished, the second I hooked it up to the grid, it instantly crashed everything. So I gathered supplies and headed back over to the main production facility to begin making a few more coal generators. And nearly completely by accident, I ended up not connecting my main reactor bank to the actual power network, so I may have ended up building 24 coal reactors. But this was fine. It just meant in the future we'd absolutely not have to worry about power. No longer having to worry about power made building the factory a lot easier. I simply chucked down a bunch of power lines to link everything together, and then I could pretty much put down anything I wanted. This made getting to the final stage and producing all the parts for the project a lot quicker. So on the bottom left hand side we had all the things producing basic iron parts, and on the top right we had everything producing steel. Now I would need both of these to produce the versatile frameworks that were going to be needed for the project, along with a couple of other things that we would need for automated wiring circuits. To try and make production balance as best as possible, I made sure to join some of the conveyor lines going into the assemblers that would be producing parts that they typically lacked. I also made sure to put buffers in place on all the conveyor belts where the parts weren't being used. This meant they'd sit inside the industrial storage containers where I could use them later instead of just getting wasted. I also found that you could double the capacity of the industrial storage containers by doubling them up on top of each other. You then put vertical conveyor lifts in between the two, one going up and one going down on the other side. This allows parts to constantly circulate between the two storage containers, meaning that you can have one conveyor belt going in and filling up both the containers. Now with all of the different parts automated, I could sit back and relax as all the parts were produced in my little factory and sent all the way to the space elevator. And that's it, we've finally done it, boys. All the parts are assembled, ready to be sealed up and sent off to Fix-It Inc. for all of our juicy new plans. And that's going to be it for today, boys. If you like what you've seen, a like and a subscribe would be much appreciated. Other than that, have an awesome day and I'll see you guys around next time.